Hey folks, how's it going? It's R&D Diesel here today, and we're going to be talking about the top 10 things that you should never do if you have a diesel vehicle. Now do bear in mind here, I do have a little bit of a make bias since I'm primarily experienced with your 80s, 90s, and early 2000s Ford diesels, but a lot of this stuff still applies whether you've got, say, a Volkswagen diesel or a Cummins diesel or even a Duramax or who knows, anything, whether it be car, truck, whatever. Now I'm going to be putting these things in order of what I think are the least destructive to potentially the most destructive of all. If you guys think there should be a different top 10 or that you think they should go in a different order, please feel free to let me know. I'd be happy to hear about that. Leave your comments below in the comment box. Now first off on this list, I think applies to not only diesel engines, but also any of your turbocharged engines, whether it be naturally aspirated or not, any engine whatsoever. And that is, don't immediately drive off with it after you start it. At least give it some time for that oil to circulate through and get a little bit warmed up. I like to start my diesel engine, take off my sunshade, put on my seatbelt, find a good radio station, and then wait a couple more seconds until you get that oil flowing, and then you can drive off and you're good to go. Definitely wait longer if it's going to be colder outside, as your oil is going to be a lot more viscous and won't flow as well. If you drive off too soon, you really run the risk of starving your turbocharger and other components of oil, as colder oil is generally very viscous and it doesn't flow as well, and so it's not going to get to those critical bearings and whatnot. Next up on the list is do not run fuel additives that are not ultra-low sulfur diesel compliant. Now this especially applies if you have a lot of your more modern diesel engines that have a lot of emissions controls. The sulfur in the fuel can potentially do a lot of damage to those emissions catalysts and whatnot. That's not so big a deal if you have an older diesel engine, such as I've got the 7.3. This thing wasn't originally required to run off of ultra-low sulfur diesel, so I can run the additives and it really won't have any effect on the engine. Now, if you do use a fuel additive, make sure that you look at the back of the label, and you should be able to see something to the extent that says this is ultra-low sulfur diesel compliant additive. Make sure it has that, otherwise don't use it. Another thing I see done quite a bit on a lot of your older 6.9 and 7.3 IDI diesel engines is disconnecting the glow plug relay or controller. Don't do it. A lot of times your glow plug relays or your controllers are set up in such a way that it monitors the resistance and prevents the glow plugs from overheating. Now if you're just bypassing it with a button, you really have no idea how hot those glow plugs are, and you really run the risk of overheating them to the extent that they're no longer going to work anymore. So don't do that. Now, this next one applies pretty much only if you have a more modern diesel engine with the diesel particulate filter, and that is don't remove your stock exhaust tip. Especially your Fords and your General Motors diesels, they have a special fluted exhaust that intentionally mixes some incoming air with the exhaust gas. That's done to lower the temperature, otherwise it can get so hot that it can melt your tail lights. I've heard some stories of it burning off paint. It's really not so good. Now, if you do choose to upgrade your exhaust tip, just make sure that you get one that is indeed fluted and that is going to reduce the temperature like the stock one did. Now, here's another one that pretty much applies for any vehicle that you're tuning at all, and that is make sure the engine is solid, make sure the transmission is solid, and everything is ready to go before you put aftermarket tuning on it. If you've got components that are already weak, maybe you got a weak fuel pump, you're only going to be putting more stress on it in the process, and odds are that you could do some catastrophic damage to your entire vehicle. Another one I've heard done a bit more than it probably should be, and that is stacking chips and programmers. In a vehicle such as the 7.3 Power Stroke, you can put a programmer and re-flash the engine control module, and you can also put in a chip. Now, this is kind of not really smart at all because, first off, the chip is going to override the ECM all the time, and so your programmer is doing absolutely nothing. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to apply for that sort of situation, but maybe you have other modifications. Perhaps you've got some sort of regulator or controller that might be, say, a boost cooler, for instance. Maybe you've got a resistor that you put in with one of the sensors, or some specially designed sensor that is designed to trick the computer so that it puts a higher output of, say, fuel or pressure so that you get better performance. If you've got good tuning, it will optimize all that stuff without any external modifications. And if you do these other modifications, such as throwing resistors where they're not originally called for, and you throw on some tuning, you could potentially do some serious damage to your engine. So don't do that. Now, this is another one I see done quite a bit more often than should be, and that is getting aftermarket tuning without a proper gauge setup. And whenever you start doing performance tuning, you really start increasing the output of your engine. You put a lot of stress on components that weren't originally designed for it. One thing, especially with a diesel engine, that you keep track of is exhaust gas temperatures. You also keep track of your transmission temperature, that's what I've got, and also boost pressure. That's just to make sure you don't have any boost leaks. But bottom line is, if you don't keep an eye on, say, the exhaust gas temperature, you can do some real damage to the engine and completely destroy the thing if you're not careful. And that's why I make sure that I have a gauge and I keep an eye on it. It might be one of those things that you don't think is necessary, but trust me, it is. It's not there just for show. I keep an eye on this thing whenever I'm going on big wide open throttle runs to make sure that this sucker doesn't get too high of exhaust gas temperature and blow up. Now this next one should be pretty obvious if you are a diesel owner, and that is don't put gasoline in your diesel engine. Now it's not necessarily that the gas is going to do complete destruction to the diesel engine. It's actually probably worse internally if you put diesel in a gas engine for interesting reasons. But first off, gasoline doesn't have the lubricity that diesel does, and your fuel systems inside the diesel engine rely on that diesel for lubrication, and gasoline is very dry, and it can cause accelerated wear of a lot of your fuel system components. But another thing is that your diesel engine is not going to run very well off gasoline, because diesel and gas are designed to have very different characteristics. You see, gasoline is rated by octane, diesel engine is rated by cetane, and they're basically the opposites of one another. So a gasoline has a very low cetane rating, which means it's very hard to ignite upon compression, because it's designed to have a high octane, which is the measure of its ability to resist combustion upon compression, to prevent knock inside of your high compression gasoline engines. So your engine's probably going to run like garbage if you have gasoline in it. Now, if you have a modern diesel that has the selective catalyst reduction, that has the diesel exhaust fluid, make sure that you use high-quality diesel exhaust fluid. Don't put the cheap, no-name stuff in there. Now, when you are buying diesel exhaust fluid, make sure that it either has the API for American Petroleum Institute label on there, or the ISO 22241 spec. Those are specifications that ensure that the diesel exhaust fluid is very pure and very clean. If it doesn't have that, don't use it. And last but not least is something that hopefully you guys already know, and that is don't shoot ether into your diesel engine. Now this is something that I'm pretty sure it's ruined a number of engines before. It probably ruined one of the ones that I went to look at. Now the reason why is ether it's very flammable, it's explosive, if you will. And when you shoot that into your diesel engine, well, your engine's only designed to compress air, which is by itself not flammable at all. And you run a really significant risk that as that piston's moving up during the compression stroke, it can cause a pre-ignition of that ether, which if there's enough momentum built up, it can do serious damage. You know, we're talking cracked pistons, blown head gaskets, we're talking broken rings, you name it. It's pretty much instantaneous damage. Now, if the engine doesn't start without ether, then there's some other serious problems going on here. If your glow plug system is working properly and your engine's healthy, you should never have to use ether. Maybe unless it's like, I don't know, 20 degrees below zero. But even then, just plug the block in. Now, it'd be much better to have an engine that's going to be a little bit slower to start than one that's going to be broken. Now, the problem gets even worse if you have a working glow plug system. Those glow plugs create intentional hot spots inside of your cylinder, so that, again, as you're compressing it, it increases the likelihood that that ether is going to go off and cause some serious damage to your engine. So especially if the glow plugs have a chance of working, never use ether. Now, this might be a little bit different if you got like a Cummins with a grid heater, but either way, still don't use ether. Just please. Gasoline engines, it's probably okay, but not in a diesel. Just do not do it. Well, folks, that does it for this video here today. I hope you enjoyed it, and that's my list of top 10 things that you should never do if you have a diesel engine. So hopefully you haven't been doing any of those things, and if you have, hopefully you're not doing it at all anymore, especially after you've watched this. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave those down below in the comment box. Take care.